Modern drivetrains are better than they've ever been. And these days, even relatively inexpensive entry-level mountain bikes like this Polygon Siskiyou T7 come with 1x wide-range drivetrains. And in the case of the T7, it has the Shimano Deore 12-speed group set. And after logging a couple hundred miles on this bike, it's got me wondering how much better Shimano's higher tier offerings can actually be. So I reached out to Jensen USA, and they were generous enough to provide 99 spokes with the complete range of Shimano drivetrains: Deore, SLX, XT, and even XTR, to test, review, and ultimately determine which drivetrain offers you the best bang for your buck. Now, their only caveat was that we gave away this XTR drivetrain at the end of testing. And by watching this video, you're well on your way to winning over $800 worth of parts. Somewhere in this video is a secret question, and don't worry, once you find it, it's not going to be so secret. But all you need to do is answer that question in our Instagram post that has this giveaway in it. I know it's a little complicated, but essentially find the video here in the YouTube channel, answer it on our Instagram post, which I will have linked there in the description, and then you'll be entered to win. But now let's get back to the reason I reached out to Jensen in the first place: figuring out which Shimano drivetrain represents the best value for you. And of course, don't forget to be listening for that question as we go. First up, let's talk about the drivetrain that came with my T7, and that's Deore. A full Deore drivetrain, including the cassette, derailleur, shifter, and chain, weighs 1,360 grams, or 3 pounds, and if you're buying it new, will cost you $188. Of all the drivetrains I tested for this video, I probably spent the most amount of time on this Deore drivetrain, probably about 200 or 300 miles over the course of 6 months. And as you'll see in the video, I tried to do a majority of my testing on techie XC trails that required lots of shifting, sometimes while navigating tricky rocks or tight corners. And I'm happy to report that the bike was shifting just as well when I took that Deore drivetrain off as when I built the bike up. And I think a big part of that comes down to the materials used on this Deore derailleur. There's not a bit of plastic in sight, which might increase the weight just a bit, but makes it much more resilient against small falls and poor storage. Like every derailleur in Shimano's 12-speed lineup, this one does feature the Shadow RD Plus clutch, which was plenty strong and all but eliminated any chain noise while testing. Moving on then to the shift lever, and just like the derailleur, it offers little more than reliable shifting, and to be honest, that's all you really need from a good mountain bike drivetrain if you ask me. The thumb pads are made entirely of plastic but do have small grooves to help improve grip, and the cable adjuster was easy to adjust even while riding. The Deore shifter also features Shimano's Rapid Fire Plus technology, which allows for 3 downshifts in 1 throw of a lever. Something that's super handy when you're getting to a real steep climb that you need to shift down for. Lastly, the Deore cassette has all 12 cogs built out of steel, with the 7 biggest pinned to an aluminum spider on the back. Most importantly though, it features Shimano's Hyperglide Plus technology, which is the same thing you'll find throughout the entire Shimano 12-speed range, that, when paired with a Shimano chain, helps ramp the chain up and down gears, making for silky smooth shifts even under moderate load. And it's this smooth shifting that I really want to emphasize about Deore. Yeah, it doesn't have the most features and it's definitely not light, but it does shift very smooth and is very reliable. And to be honest, if I could only ride a Deore drivetrain for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be disappointed. Moving on then to Shimano's mid-tier 12-speed mountain bike drivetrain, and that is SLX. But before I tell you about my experience while riding the SLX drivetrain, if you're finding this video helpful, we at 99 Spokes would also find it helpful if you would go ahead and hit that like button on this video. Now, back to SLX. This 4-piece group set, including a cassette, derailleur, chain, and shifter, weighs 1,250 grams or 2.75 pounds and costs $257.96. For those of you keeping score, that's going to be 110 grams lighter and $70 more expensive than Deore. And a big part of that weight savings comes from the SLX cassette, which, as you can see here, has swapped out the steel 51-tooth cog for aluminum. And while that aluminum cog will help save weight, it's also going to increase wear, meaning if you spend a lot of time in your biggest granny gear, then you're probably going to wear that cog down a bit faster than the rest of your cassette. The rest of the weight savings on the SLX drivetrain mostly comes from this SLX derailleur, which, as you can see just by looking at it, has a lot more machining than the Deore one. To be honest though, this quarter-pound difference in weight wasn't noticeable to me, and that basically sums up my entire experience with the SLX drivetrain. It really doesn't feel that much different from Deore. To me, the only real noticeable upgrade when going from Deore to SLX is actually with the chain. This features Shimano's Sil-Tech coating that they claim helps reduce noise and friction, as well as increases the life of the chain. All in all, I was surprisingly underwhelmed by the performance of SLX. Before doing this test, if I was on the market for a bike and saw one that came with SLX over Deore, I would have definitely gone for that as opposed to Shimano's entry-level 12-speed offering. But now, after testing these side by side, I doubt many riders could tell a difference in a blind test. I know I sure couldn't. With the SLX testing out of the way, it was time to swap that out for a full XT drivetrain. And to be honest, I think Shimano drivetrains might just be the easiest to install and work on, which is handy if you're an at-home mechanic. And this comes from a few seemingly simple but extremely user-friendly features that Shimano has built into the derailleur. Firstly, engaging and disengaging the clutch is just as easy as flipping this lever. You never need to worry about prying the derailleur open or fiddling with any small switches or buttons, but you do need to make sure you remember to flip that back into the on position. Otherwise, when you go for your first ride, your bike's going to remind you by giving you a whole lot of extra chain noise. Another seemingly simple feature that I really appreciated is that you can easily see the functionality of the limit screws. This not only makes it easier to visualize what they're doing and how they affect your drivetrain, but also removes the guessing game of which screw you're fiddling with when you're trying to dial in your drivetrain. All you need to do is simply look at which screw is currently bottoming out and adjust that one. Lastly, every one of Shimano's 12-speed derailleurs has a built-in B tension guide printed or stamped on the back of the derailleur cage. This eliminates the need for a separate B tension gauge and makes what could otherwise be a slightly confusing process pretty much foolproof. Really, the only small gripe I have with installing and removing a Shimano drivetrain is that none of the levers have a hinge on them. Now, for most riders, this isn't going to be a big deal because they're probably going to be pairing their Shimano drivetrain with some Shimano brakes and they can use the iSpec integration system. But for me, I had to take off my grip every time I wanted to add or remove a different shift lever, and that was just a bit of a pain. So if you're a home mechanic, keep all that stuff in mind. Now, let's move on and talk about the XT drivetrain. The 4-piece XT group set weighs 1,160 grams or 2.5 pounds and costs $395.96. For reference, that's a full 200 grams less than Deore, but also more than twice the price. And just like we saw with SLX, most of the weight savings in this case is going to come from the XT cassette, which as you can see now has 2 aluminum cogs. Next up, let's talk about the derailleur. And it's here that we really start to see some significant differentiation from Shimano's lower tier offerings. Firstly, the tension of the clutch can be adjusted externally, whereas the clutch cover has to be removed to do the same on Deore or SLX. This shouldn't be a huge deal as that Shadow RD Plus clutch is pretty slow to wear, and not many riders these days are intentionally lowering the friction of their clutch to improve shifting performance, but it's a feature, so if you're into that, then you're probably going to like this XT derailleur. Another upgrade of this XT derailleur over SLX is that it now features ball bearings on the pulley wheels instead of bushings. This should help decrease friction and increase the lifespan of those pulley wheels. But it's actually with the XT shift lever that we really see a big jump in performance. First off, it's got a rubber pad on the downshift lever, which just helps improve the overall feel and quality of the XT shifter. The lever throw and shift speed are also hugely improved over SLX, largely due to Shimano's instant release technology. If anything, the shifting was almost too smooth, with hardly any auditory or kind of mechanical feedback as you were shifting through those gears. Riders who are used to the feel of, say, SRAM GX or Deore or SLX are gonna have to get used to that. And to be honest, it did take me a couple rides to get used to what that shifting was feeling like with, again, very little feedback. It honestly is quite a unique experience. And speaking of unique experiences, this XT shifter is the first in the lineup to include Shimano's multi-shift technology. Essentially what that means is that you can get 2 upshifts in one lever throw, which is super, super cool. And if you haven't tried this yet, once you do, it's gonna be hard to go back. Looking at the footage of me riding on the Deore drivetrain, you can see me regularly opting to change 2 gears at a time when upshifting, which on both Deore and SLX requires 2 presses of the lever. And while this is of course plenty easy enough to live with, the extra $20 that it takes you to get an XT lever versus an SLX is absolutely worth it. All in all, shifting on this XT drivetrain was dreamlike. both in its multitude of user-friendly features, but also in its hyper-smooth, borderline vague shifting experience. But we still have one more drivetrain to talk about, and that is, of course, Shimano's flagship model, XTR. This was by far the drivetrain I was most excited to get my hands on. Not just because it's the only one I had never ridden before this test, but also due to its baller image and price tag, costing a whopping $957.96. For that, you'll get a 4-piece drivetrain weighing just 1,010 grams or 2.3 pounds. As we've seen in the other drivetrains, most of the XTR's weight savings is coming from the cassette, which in my opinion is absolutely the piece de resistance of the XTR group set. It features 3 aluminum cogs, 5 titanium cogs, and the remaining 4 smallest cogs being made out of steel. And while I doubt many riders are going to notice the 100-gram difference going from an XT cassette to an XTR, it sure does look trick. And speaking of looking trick, that's what I'd say about pretty much the rest of the XTR drivetrain. It's got the same features as XT, but with some more exotic materials and more machining to help save weight and, again, make it look sick. One thing I noticed that may come down to these materials is the increase in audible feedback when shifting, which I personally preferred to the near silent shifting of XT. But again, this really is a personal preference thing. Another differentiating point between XTR and XT is that this XTR cable comes with a polymer coating as opposed to the OptiSlick that you're going to get on the other 3 models. Again, this helps to reduce friction, making those shifts that much smoother. But to be honest, that lever action wasn't actually any noticeably lighter than what I had found on XT. Lastly, the XTR chain features hollow pins to help further reduce the weight by 10 grams when compared to Shimano's other 12-speed chains. And in total, I would say the shifting performance of XTR can be summed up as a story of diminishing returns. It costs $600 more than the already dialed XT setup, which will be a pretty hard pill for most riders to swallow. That said, it does absolutely represent the best you can buy when it comes to Shimano's mechanical drivetrains. And if you like the idea of having the ultimate shifting experience on your own mountain bike, then like I said at the beginning of this video, you are in luck. Jensen has partnered with us over at 99 Spokes to give away this very XTR drivetrain that I have been reviewing and testing for this video. To win, you're going to need to answer the following question on our post on Instagram. I know it's a little confusing, but we're trying to find the best way to integrate Instagram and YouTube here. So the question is, who or what influenced you to begin cycling? My answer is the freestyle motocross riders of the early 2000s. Guys like Brian Deegan and Travis Pastrana were my idols, but I couldn't afford a dirt bike. So I started building BMX jumps in my front yard, and the rest is history. Again, answer that question, who or what influenced you to begin cycling, on our Instagram post. And I've got the link to that Instagram post down in the description to make it easier for you to get there. So the real question we were trying to answer when we started making this video is which of Shimano's 4 12-speed drivetrains represents the best value for the average rider. And after spending a lot of time on each of them, I've decided that it's actually a bit of a tie. The first winner is going to go to Shimano Deore. This drivetrain costs less than $200 and rivals the performance of even XTR. While it may lack a few features and creature comforts that some of the higher end drivetrains have, it's still just as reliable. And to be honest, that's the biggest thing that I am looking for when choosing a mountain bike drivetrain. Now, I realize that choosing this so-called entry-level 12-speed drivetrain as one of our winners might be a bit controversial. So if you disagree, let me know and tell me why down there in the comments. But me personally, I think Deore represents just about all most recreational riders will need. In some ways, it's almost as if Shimano made Deore too good, with not enough performance gap between it and SLX. So if you're comparing between 2 bikes, one with Deore and one with SLX, rest assured that at least in the shifting department, you will not be disappointed if you go for that lower costing option. And speaking of performing too good, I think the same can be said about our next drivetrain winner, which is XT. The XT drivetrain includes nearly every feature as the XTR, but at less than half the cost. And it's for this reason that I think it represents an excellent value, especially for more experienced riders looking to eke every bit of performance out of their mountain bike. Lastly, I want to share with you what I would choose if I were to build my own Shimano drivetrain up part by part. I'm going to start with the cassette. And for that, I am going to go with the trusty Deore cassette. While you could save a little weight by going with a higher tier option, this Deore cassette still has that same Hyperglide Plus machining, making your shifts nice and smooth, and the fact that it's built out of steel means it is going to last just a little bit longer. Moving on then to the derailleur, and once again, I'm going to go with Deore. I personally seldom adjust my clutch tension, and there's a plethora of ways, namely my conditioning, for me to speed up my climbs than reducing the friction in my pulley wheels. Next up is the chain, and in this case I am going to opt for SLX. The SLX chain is the cheapest way you can get a chain with Shimano's Sil Tech coating, which helps decrease noise, friction, and extend the life of your chain. Last up is the shift lever, and here I would splurge and go for XT to get those super fast, smooth shifts, as well as that multi-release on the upshift. I think that this will give me just about XT performance at pretty dang close to the Deore price. But once again, I'm curious your opinion. Let me know in the comments which Shimano parts you would choose for your own personal drivetrain if you were spending your hard-earned money on it. Lastly, if you found this video helpful, then be sure to subscribe to the 99 Spokes YouTube channel as well as the Jensen USA YouTube channel, which I have linked in the description. Best of luck on the giveaway, and as always, remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.